Jimmy, I was thinking about where we had met. You,
Yes,
you remember where?
yes, yeah, up in Richmond,
At a
at
farm,
the barn,
at a barn, right?
the urban organic barn.
I don't have too many people I can say I met them at a barn.
Yes, that was a great event, and to me, it shows and emphasizes why you network and why you do that. So I love it.
Really good. All right, so I see a bunch. We have a lot of attendees kind of coming in now, so we'll give them a few more seconds and we'll get started. Um, and I'll start just with today's title. So today we're going to focus on executive reporting and really talking about from technical to business risk, how to communicate with boards. Um, I have the privilege and honor to have with me a esteemed guest, Jimmy Sanders, who I was just talking about where I met. Very few people I could talk about I met in a barn. So Jimmy and I met on a barn at an event. So from there developed a really good friendship and maybe just a little bit about Jimmy, and I'll have a few thoughts I wanted to share and kind of get your opinions on Jimmy. But just maybe just an introduction. Jimmy spent the better part of 2 decades securing data and systems for cyber threats. In addition to his duties today at Netflix DVD, Jimmy serves as the San Francisco Bay chapter president of the ISSA since 2014. He's also on the ISA International Board of Directors, and he's a speaker at Black Hat, Secure World, InfoSec World, and he's actually a keynote speaker. We were just talking about that at the upcoming RSA conference, which is virtual this year. But I think that was actually the last time we saw each other, also last year at the RSA conference. And maybe just a little bit before Netflix DVD, Jimmy had also served as the senior security management roles at organizations like Samsung, Fiserv, SAP. And then on committees of colleges like Marriott, Holin, and other advisory boards. Jimmy, the amount of certifications he has, we're going to run out of time, but he's a well-certified cybersecurity expert, and I am more than blessed and honored to have you here today. So, Jimmy, thanks for joining us. Maybe just a few trends and stats I'm seeing in the market. I thought, just as a starting point, and then we'll take it from there. First of all, we see that cybersecurity is at an all-time high, especially with COVID-19 coming into place. There's more CISOs that are moving into roles in their business where they have to understand the business effect today and how the business processes are supported by technology. It's an integral part of kind of key strategy in organizations. And you also see that where they're aligning themselves with the business objectives, and also they're reporting often to CEOs and moving up kind of in that food chain. So that's something that I think that is a big trend that we've seen over the last few years. But this past year, we've seen that expedite. There's a stat actually about by the end of this coming year, 100% of large enterprises will have CISOs, or have CISO positions. They don't. They're all looking to fill them sometimes, but certainly a huge change from just a few years back. The cybersecurity market in general is going to pass 170 billion by next year. 68% of business leaders feel their cybersecurity risks are increasing. And then I saw one more stat here also was really interesting. That was, first of all, there's an increase obviously in the cost per breach that we're seeing and the global kind of impact of that. But when you look at it, there's more than 70% of security executives that believe that their budgets this coming year are going to shrink also. So you see that the pandemic is certainly having an effect also, and part of that I think is becoming more and more efficient. So maybe just before we get into cybersecurity, Jimmy, you have a fascinating journey and past, and I've heard it a few times, and every time I hear it, I'm usually with my jaw kind of on the floor just listening. But talk us maybe just a little bit how you've become a security officer, and I know it's been a 20-year journey for you, but it didn't start with security. So I would love
Yeah.
to hear more about kind of how you got to here.
So I started off. I took a job as an intern when I was in junior college, and I was studying computers. And that job went from being an intern to being a full-time system administrator. Worked for a couple of years from a system administrator to a device manager. And I was working at a financial company. And the CIO was walking around and he had this piece of paper in his hand. It was like, man, I can't find anybody to fill this position. This is a security engineering position. And I said, let me look at it. I looked at it, said, check, I can do that. Check, I can do that. Check, I can do that. I said, hey, I can do this position. He was like, you, I said, yeah, I can do it. He's like, okay, Jimmy, I'll give you a 3-month probationary period. And it was for a security engineering position. So starting in 3 months, failed to tell me we had failed our SSAE 17 audit exam. We were going through a PCI audit. And one of the other requirements was I get a CISSP within a year. Long story short, the position was a security engineering position that only looked at logs. I realized you can't do, or I couldn't do a good job of security if the only thing I cared about was network logs and firewall logs. So I started implementing other solutions, working with other teams. And so by doing that, the visibility came to where that position went from security engineer to a security officer. Because at the time, CISOs and head of security and those titles weren't around. And so I've leveraged that. I've worked at that to work at other amazing companies. And that also goes to the point that you were saying as well, Yair, is that one of the things that I'm seeing and I realize is that we're on the 3rd and 4th generation of CISOs. In the beginning, you were a network engineer or a systems engineer who started off and they said, oh, you can do network, so let's pull you over to security. So your core wasn't security. Now, luckily, by the 3rd generation, the visibility of being a CISO is there, and also the pay of a CISO is there. So it's enticing a lot of people to jump into the field.
Yeah, and that's it's very interesting. I think that journey and exactly what you described about started more as an engineer, now it's an officer. A little bit describes the change, right? It's no longer just technical tactical. It's actually strategic now. Right?
Yes.
Would that be accurate?
Oh, yes, because I still remember because when I watched the person before me, I would watch this person do their job and they sat in front of a computer. They didn't talk to too many people and they stayed relatively isolated. And one of the things about security, unfortunately, is if you're doing a good job, you rarely get noticed because they don't see it. If you're not getting sick, you don't realize how healthy you really are. You just realize you're not getting sick. And you don't even realize this in the back of your head. It's only when security isn't doing its job properly does that happen. And so one of the ways that we as heads of security and different security executives learn to do is by leveraging what we're doing right and translating that into language that shows the board, that shows the executives that security is functioning properly, even if there's no attacks that you can visibly see.
So what are the challenges now that you see as an executive on a daily basis when you're managing information security and cyber risks?
The challenge is complacency. And what I mean by that is if you do a great job at security and you're protecting people from getting viruses, you're protecting people from getting ransomware, the executives can use their laptops and go on vacations to foreign places and nothing happens to them. They can go home and they can, the kids may jump on the laptop, especially during the COVID period, and nothing bad happens. It may seem like you're not doing anything because nothing happened. And so how do you translate that? And how do you also keep security in the forefront of people's minds when they don't actually see it? It's like living in a gated community. How do you know that there's crime out in the real world if you've never experienced crime yourself? So how to share that information with them without having to expose them to that real threat? Because my job is to make sure that a user doesn't have to worry too much about clicking in an email for phishing. If a phishing email comes through, I don't necessarily blame the user. I blame me and my security architecture.
Got it. And I mean, so that I think goes to the strategy and decision making part of things, right?
Yes,
So, when you're building that team out of security professionals, let's start from there. What are you looking for in a team there?
I'm looking for hunger. I'm looking for aptitude in a certain area. I'm not looking for the expert right now, because what I've seen is that if somebody has the hunger and the aptitude, and you put them in a position to succeed, and you give them direction, but first they need direction. So you need to ensure that they have aptitude, hunger, but also give them the direction and let them go fish. They will blossom into a great employee. And so you look at the team, you look at the dynamics of the team, you ensure that you you have some form of overarching holistic ideology. If you're going to be forming the standard, like following the NIST standard of security practices, or a SAN standard, whatever standard you happen to be, and you adapt that to the company and also to the culture, because every company you go to has a different culture. A DVD culture is totally different than a Samsung culture. That's totally different than an SAP culture. And it doesn't make any culture good or bad. It just makes it different.
I remember you mentioned to me in the past that there's something very unique about the Netflix, right? About the culture there, and maybe talk about that. I mean, it actually resonated a lot, and something I've actually adopted in our company as well because of what you mentioned to me about that. The accountability, but also kind of the giving people that space to really lead. So maybe tell us more about that.
So as I stated before, I came from a financial background. So I was used to compliance, 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 checking every dollar, um, telling people no, using a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and distraction and doubt, to sell products, to buy products, to pass audits. And then you flip them on your head by going to DVD.com, where we have a motto that's called freedom and responsibility. And that means that we'll give every employee from day one the freedom to do their designated job. So if you're a network engineer and we consider you the expert, we'll give you every tool in the book. If you come to security and you say, I need root access to this server, it is my job to provide you that access that you just requested, because we give you the freedom to do your job. You flip that on your head, we also hold you responsible for doing that. So if something bad happens under your watch, we hold you responsible for that, even if it's not directly your fault, because that's the whole rule of freedom and responsibility. You understand that there's hidden implications by asking for certain things. And so you will get the freedom to create amazing things, to do amazing work, but we'll also hold you responsible for that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I mean, I've always been a believer of owning your own fate, kind of, and taking responsibility. It doesn't always work in large corporations, I can tell you that. So it's definitely a very unique model in a company so large. But it's fun to hear how you guys are implementing that. And I think in the security space, it's a welcomed approach, because at the end of the day, there's so many holes and so many gaps that you need people who can be proactive and really just help strategically kind of think about where our problems are, and then start patching it up, and not turn it into this bureaucratical nightmare where until they get approval for something, you're exposed for many months or forever.
That,
So
yep, agreed. That's the whole point, is that the ability to move in an agile, rapid fashion, not wait, because attackers aren't waiting for a change. Attackers are not sitting around asking and saying, hey, do I have permission to attack your site? One of the things that I know that people used to fear is running, hard attacks and scans and test scans on your production environment. And my response to anybody who questions that is that an attacker has never asked me permission to attack our web servers, our Exchange servers. And so why would I shield us from something that is already exposed to the world?
yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. So maybe it's like taking that that approach now into a practical place, right? So when we look at
Yes.
like how you communicate, between the cyber risk teams and the executives and executive boards, right? How would you envision a well-managed kind of communication process between those two groups?
So first, in terms of, there's a big difference between your executive team and your board team. And what I mean by that is your executive team is obviously hired and employed by the company that you currently work for, where a board may be comprised of a lot of individuals who own or manage or work at other companies that are not directly related into your space. So your internal company may have a creed, may have a culture, may have a philosophy, and you would need to understand what keeps them up at night. What are their pain points? and you would craft your language and your reports um, to ensure that their ideas and concerns are being heard. With the board, generally, you may, if you're talking to the board, you may get 15 minutes to talk to them, not an hour to talk to them. Not You don't talk to them every day or whatever. So you need to make sure that what you have counts. So show them the things that they're interested in. Show them the things that are most impactful that you want to get across, um, and make sure that you build integrity along with that. And so what I mean by that is that you can talk very technical to them because, for instance, you may be talking to some engineers who happen to be on your board, or you may be talking to some CEOs who could care less about technical talk. The main thing that you want to ensure that you do is, from board meeting to report, you use this consistent language that they can hold you accountable on, because what will happen is, one board meeting, they'll say, in the last board meeting, Jimmy, you said blah. And now you're telling us something totally different. Now tell us, which is it? Is it Jekyll or is it Hyde? So being consistent as possible, using consistent language, a consistent framework that is universally accepted as a legitimate framework, to me is key when it comes to talking to a board or talking to executives.
I think we've talked a lot about on the past webinars about the NIST CSF being one of those, especially in the U.S. Right, ISO 27001, another one that we see globally, but NIST really has kind of dominated that. Certainly with the boards, we see it more and more, and I think that having that common language, like you're talking about, is huge, and consistency is huge as well, right? Then, especially when you're talking to a little bit of a less technical crowd, I think that you need to have clear metrics that can be measured and tracked over time, and show those previous metrics when you're comparing, right, these periods, because you want to be able to show kind of empirical data and how that is growing, from period to period. Or I think the second way of communicating with non-technical boards is really taking it to a more of a business impact, right? So
Yes.
talking about which assets
Yes,
they.
using business units to show the impact of certain security implications to the business, because every business have core crown jewels or holy cows that, if you put in certain security restrictions here, a revenue may gain, revenue may lose. What's the business impact if something bad happens to that business unit? So being able to talk about to a specific business unit or to something that has more notoriety or more press. The other big thing is that when you talk to the board, is the generally a board is made of somebody who's already very powerful and well-connected individual. So that means that they would have peers or other security professionals who may give them advice, who may give them talks. They may have another security officer or another CISO at the company that they currently run who presents in a different way than you're presenting. So a board member may come to you and say, Jimmy, you present like this. My CISO at my company presents like this. Why is he doing it so bad? Or why are you doing it so bad? So ensuring that you have the numbers and the language to be able to effectively communicate um, why you're talking to them this way, why are you reporting it in this way, and not making sure that everything that you're saying is made of sand, so that when they actually dig into the fundamentals of what you're talking about, everything crumbles underneath you.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And like maybe just about, when I think about the outcome of these executive meetings and board meetings, so on, often it goes back to budgets, right? It's about how you're spending your money and how are you prioritizing that, right? How are you allocating it? Are you doing it correctly or not? How do you measure, right, if you're properly using that capital, for
So
results?
so one of the ways that I try to measure is percentages of impact, meaning especially like a DVD side or a media side, viewership can go up, viewership can go down. That may mean attacks go down, traffic goes up, traffic goes down. So for me to say there were 3.1 million attacks we stopped last week, that number means absolutely zero. But if I say I implemented this new solution, and over the past 3 months of implementing the solution and it's been operational, the amount of attacks have dropped 5% in this specific area that the solution is made for. That is the way I would translate it to the board, um, and not in terms of overall numbers, because you can gloss over and come up with some glorified numbers. If you want to make yourself always look good, you can make sure you put lots of millions in something or lots of thousands. Say I blocked 1,000 attacks or 1,000,000 attacks, and that sounds good on paper of when you want to like highlight yourself. But the problem is that if that number isn't going down, if the board looks at it and says, Jimmy, you say you blocked 3 million attacks last week and you blocked 2 million attacks this week, you block less attacks, when it could be that the percentage of the attacks went down. So making sure that you don't dig your own hole by using numbers, a numbers game, and I try to use a percentage game about that.
Yeah, no, that's good advice there, and I think that showing the impact right through that percentage is much more important versus just giving a hard number. We have one of our solutions that focuses on that executive reporting piece, and a lot of what you're mentioning, now really kind of is exactly how we present it there, where we try to position things in trends and comparing periods over periods, so it's not just a standalone 5 million attacks block, because that's meaningless on its own. It really needs to come into the context of time and kind of is it getting better or worse and by how much. So that makes perfect sense. So maybe like some, I know that we keep these webinars really short. So we already get towards the end at this point with some, practical tips, tools that you would say, from your vast experience, what kind of advice would you give the viewers who are struggling today communicating to the boards? Because what we see in the market today, I see a lot of CISOs, risk officers, compliance officers, and then members of their teams that talk about this very clear and defined struggle of how do I communicate this non-technical data to more into the technical data to non-technical staff, right? And to somebody who's a little bit less, experienced there, but are often making the decisions around the budgets and right and the resources and the projects and so on. So, practical advice, and you've given some already, but maybe if you would summarize that, what would you kind of focus on?
So one of the things that I try to always do is appreciate others. So you may be practicing security, owning security, but there are so many other integral pieces. So ensuring that when you talk to the board, you give credos to the IT team that's working very hard to patch the systems, that you're also working with HR and talking about how HR is building up a great culture of making sure that you highlight the other things that the executives do to ensure that everyone understands that security is a holistic thing and it's not just you, the security manager's job. One of the other advices that I try to do is ensure that you don't patronize. These are already intelligent people. They wouldn't be in the position that they are if they weren't smart. So to dummy them down and to think that they won't get it, I'm not saying to use super technical language, but don't dumb it down to where they think that you talking to them like a 3-year-old or a high schooler. These are executives who are very keen. They may not speak cyber security language, but trust me, they definitely speak business language. So if you can start using more business language in terms of points and percentages and revenue generation, that would be beneficial. The last thing that I would say that has been crucial to me in my career is networking. That's the way I met you, Yair. That's the way I've been able to write better reports and to do better presentations and do my job more effectively, is by figuring out, leaning on the shoulder of giants and figuring out what people are doing right and what people are not doing as effective, and trying to take the things that I see that are effective that other people are doing and incorporate that into my tool bag of tricks.
Yeah, that's first of all, that is how we met. So it's always fun to reference that. But I agree with you. I think that I've learned the most about cybersecurity and risk management in general simply by meeting and talking to people. That's been my number one university and college and master's degree and PhD in the in this space is really from just networking and learning from the smartest people out there. And there's another thing I'll add to this, which is and you've told me this in the past, is not just network but help others, right? Be a mentor,
Yes.
contribute back, right? That's I remember a quote. It was something like light a spark that will light a larger fire, that you gave me once. So I very much believe in that. And before we go over to Q&A, I already see a lot of questions coming in, which is great. We'll get there in a second. I actually want to take that last point that I made now about the mentor part. and ask you a little bit, because you have a separate side, which I've always been truly inspired by, where you are impacting that next generation of not necessarily the most privileged, and people with access, but actually people who want to learn and are hungry, and you're helping them actually gain access to become the future cybersecurity leaders of the world. So we'd love to hear a little bit about that, and then we'll move over to the Q&A.
Okay.
Sorry
So
to put you
this
on the
is,
spot.
oh, it's all right. So this is something that I try to do so I work with other security organizations and other CISOs around America currently. And what we do is we work with junior colleges and community colleges throughout America, obviously Bay Area, of East Coast, Atlanta, historical Black colleges. And what we do is we team up with them and we give them a one-on-one mentor with a CISO who is amazing. You name a company, name a CISO, and they're probably part of this program. Except the students don't realize who they're getting paired against or with until it actually happens. And to watch that change in terms of teaching the students how to fish. And one of my goals and one of our goals in terms of the mentorship program is that it's not only targeted towards new students, it's targeted also towards people who are on their second careers. So working with the different educational institutions throughout America to reach out to these students, because one of the things that I discovered is that when you're in technology, it's life-changing. Your pay changes, and that enables you to do better things for your family and not just for you. I want one of the things and issues that we have currently in cybersecurity is we always talk about the talent gap. I am not the person who likes to talk about things. So we've gotten together, me and other CISOs have gotten together, and we're working on this to address the talent gap by doing something about it, by multiplying ourselves, by incorporating mentees so that we can keep this going year after year. And we're getting ready to do it again, and I'm super excited.
Yeah, amazing. You're impacting hundreds and more of future leaders, and I think that there's no better time to be actually I think communicating that message now. COVID has been a time where a lot of people's careers that were there before no longer exist or are changing.
And that is, and obviously, especially in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, you see the gigantic divide between me being able to keep working and an amazing restaurant owner or an amazing, waiter or waitress not having a job anymore. And so one of the things that I want to do is be the change, of work with people so that we can be the change and not we complain about the problem.
Yeah, I love that. Well, you've, as always, inspired me. I'm just going to go over to the Q&A a little bit here. So we have a question from Dimitri. What are some of the typical mistakes that security leaders make when communicating with upper management and other teams?
So it could be too wordy, because as I said before, board members many times have a packed board, a packed agenda. And even though security is an amazing thing, you may think that yours is the most important, but it may not be the most important to the board. So making sure that you get your point in and you leave them with something lasting. If you give a board presentation and they remember nothing about your presentation because it's filled with nothing but numbers, they may not take you up on any of the initiatives that you want. So leave them with some nugget. It's almost like you do a presentation to somebody. You want to leave some lasting ideal in their head that says, boom, oh yes, I remember Jimmy said blah. And they can take that back with them. So that's one of the things that I see. The other thing is, like I said before, too wordy or too much material, because you can't have too less material, because hopefully you have enough foundation behind it where you can elaborate if they decide to dig deeper.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I think that's something that we focus on a lot also here, which is building out reports in a way where it's a little bit like, layers that you can peel off. So you start off with a very concise, clear, and impactful summary on top, right, of the main points. And then as you want to, deep dive into specific areas, you have all that ready there. But don't throw that all in at one shot, because you're going to lose everybody by doing that, right? It's
Yeah,
all about
exactly.
yeah, that's a great point. I have another question here from Claude. He's wondering around, if your organization suffered a breach already. How do you report that to the board? I don't know if you've been in this position or not, but
Ev-
what does that look like?
So every company has had security incidents. Now, if you want to call a security incident a breach because somebody got spam or not, it's up to you. But every company has had some form of security issue. How you report that security issue is to be as transparent as possible, while also shielding them from the making of the sausage. Uh, for instance, the board doesn't need to know all the steps it took to fix the issue. What they need to know is, was there an issue? Was there an impact to the business? And what did you do to remediate that?
Yeah.
Or not what did you do to remediate that, but was it remediated? The steps that define the issue, how many hours you spend on that issue, all that is water under the bridge because that's your job. Your job is to fix the security issue. So I go crazy when I see these reports where they say $100,000 lost because of a virus. The security team lost $100,000 because they were cleaning up a virus. The security team's job is to clean up the virus. So that's not time lost. That's just them doing their job. So reporting that number to the board, it may seem like a good thing, but to me, that's not. So showing that you're handling issues, but being transparent that there was an issue, but also not exposing them to risk in terms of exposure of
Yeah.
not knowing something.
Right. Liability and too much information is not always the right approach either. So definitely a very good point there. But I do think that something I've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, and that is actually a changing trend where when I started, Centraleyes around almost 5 years ago, um, I met a lot of CISOs that would basically say everything's fine, like we're good, we're fine, and it was all about not exposing your weaknesses, right? That kind of showing vulnerability from from an exposure perspective was always the best approach because you never want to admit that something's wrong. And today you have very few CISOs that just say we're fine. CISOs
Yeah.
say we have a mature program, we're good. But I think people have become more humble, and also people realize that actually shifting liability where they're transparent, right, and they show the problems ends them in a much better place, right? And exactly the point you're making, they'll get better buy-in and so on.
But also, if you don't show 100% security, you don't give the false sense that nothing bad can happen. And when you request budget by showing that you're always striving for something, they're not saying, well, Jimmy, we got perfect security. Why do you need more money for security?
Right. Right.
So, so keeping them, enticed and hungry by showing that the attacks are still coming. Just because we haven't had a significant breach doesn't mean we haven't had significant incidents.
Yeah, great. Well, that is a great point. I think we're going to conclude here. Really, Jimmy, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. I love talking to you, and this time everybody gets to kind of tune into our conversation as well. So hopefully everybody enjoyed. We will be back next month with a very interesting and exciting new topic, which we'll send out, in the next week or so to all the viewers and to our clients and partners as well. I guess my biggest takeaway, and this is really inspiration that I get from Jimmy here, is that one line of light a spark that will light a larger fire. And I think that message is what I would like to pass on to everybody today, and inspire you all to not just get better yourself, but to help others get better. And that will make the world a better place. Jimmy, thank you so much, and have a great day, and hope to see you in person really soon.
No, thank you, Yair. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Centraleyes, for having me on. It was great.
Thank you. Take care.